Okay, so it's 10:30, so I think we can start. Okay, so welcome to this session, everyone. Okay, here in the classroom and the others online. I'd like to welcome our colleague Jolanta Łącka. I hope I didn't mess up the name. Łącka-Badura, I'm sorry, who is from Katowice, Poland, and she's a lecturer in business English. She also is the head of Foreign Language Center at the University of Katowice, Poland. She's got 2 PhD diplomas, so it's interesting, in European integration and in management. And her research interests comprise business communication, using English for business purposes, and also, for example, language of persuasion. So all interesting areas, and Jolanta is going to talk today about her research concerning pre-service students who are responding to 2 types of economic texts, if I'm not mistaken, and Jolanta is going to give us some more detail. So Jolanta, you've got 20 minutes, okay, please, you can start.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ladislav, for the introduction. Although I have just 1 PhD in linguistics and the other ones are my postgraduate diplomas, but that's not important. Thank you all for joining this presentation, both those in Brno and those who are participating virtually, like my said. The inspiration for the study that I'm going to present has come from the concern shared by a number of business English teachers at our language center about the usefulness and relevance of the business English reading materials offered by popular business English course books. The business English classroom is very often the first place where students, undergraduate business students, particularly first-year students, learn about business fundamentals, specific business issues. With very little or no specialized knowledge, they often face a range of comprehension problems which not infrequently result in their low motivation to engage in the reading tasks. The students are not sufficiently acculturated to the discipline of business and economics. They lack the cognitive model for the discipline, which means that they learn a great deal about business through English before they learn about the same things in their business-related courses. So the aim of my study was to investigate how the undergraduate business students perceive the usefulness and relevance of business-related texts offered in one of popular business English course books, which is Market Leader. Before I move on, I would like to make it very clear that my focus is not on the objective pedagogical value of the reading materials, if something like objective pedagogical value exists at all. My focus is on the subjective educational value as perceived by the students, which I think translates into their motivation and engagement. My study is theoretically grounded in 2 approaches to linguistic research, namely content-based instruction and English for specific purposes. It also draws on the theoretical principles pertaining to reading comprehension development in ESP. This combination of content-based instruction and English for specific purposes is not new. Content is very frequently and sort of naturally used as the organizing principle in a variety of ESP courses. There is a vast body of literature evidencing successful outcomes of combining these 2 approaches. And this is very much in line with the understanding of text in ESP pedagogy as a vehicle of information rather than as a linguistic object in itself. And consequently, the ESP researcher and practitioners advocate that the value of the text can only be measured in relation to students' needs. That's why there are perceptions are not to be grouped. The study involved 294 first-year undergraduate students at the University of Economics in Katowice, more or less at the B2 level of general English language proficiency. These were 12 groups of students of different specializations: management, economics, finance, international economic relations, informatics, and communications. They had no prior experience of learning business English and no professional work experience. The students who did have some experience like that, or some experience of learning business English, participated in the activities, but the results that they provided, data that they provided, were not taken into account. So the students were basically asked to do reading comprehension activities based on pairs of texts. I marked them as A and B, and complete questionnaires with their evaluation of the relevance and usefulness of the texts in each pair. So 4 groups of students were presented with texts on management styles, 4 groups of students were given texts on international marketing, and 4 groups of students were given texts on financial investment. And in each pair, as you can see, the text A was taken from Pearson's 3rd edition of Market Leader, Upper Intermediate, and text B in each pair was extracted from the internet repository of business-related articles. And I made sure that the texts were content-loaded and with quite basic, quite fundamental information pertaining to those 3 topics. And this is suggested in the titles, as you can see: Basics of Investing, Fundamentals of International Marketing. Whereas texts A, taken from the course book, suggested stories or experiences of real business people, entrepreneurs. Okay. The texts were converted into Word format, okay, as you can see, in order to ensure sufficient comparability in terms of their length, their graphic design, but also the level of difficulty. And I used the readability indices to check the readability difficulty for both texts. So I think that they were quite comparable. Okay. Now the procedure, drawing on the recommendations for effective and realistic reading comprehension tasks in ESP, the procedure involved pre-reading, while reading, and post-reading activities that the students performed. Plus, they were supposed to fill in the questionnaire that I provided, and the total time was 75 to 80 minutes, depending on the group. The pre-reading activities involved building expectations, preliminary evaluation of the texts based on titles and skimming, plus previewing vocabulary. The last one was not covered in the questionnaire. So how about this building expectation stage? So the students were basically, before they were presented with the texts, before they saw the texts, I told them, in a few minutes you are going to read 2 texts on international marketing, management styles, or financial investment, depending on the group. And before you see the text, think of 1, 2, or 3 questions that you would like to find answers to in a text like that. Okay? So they were sort of sharing their expectations. And now if you look at the results, I don't have enough time to go through all of the questions that the students submitted, but if you just look at the most frequently asked questions: which management style is the least effective? What are the qualities of a good manager? How to be a good manager? How to manage people effectively? Okay. In the next pair of text, what is international marketing? How does international marketing work? What are the key activities in international marketing? And the third pair of texts, how to invest profitably, what are the best instruments and strategies, what risks, problems are involved, how to minimize them, how does the stock market work. Okay, so we can see that the most frequently submitted questions clearly indicate that firstly, the students do not have the basic understanding, the basic knowledge of those issues, and secondly, that they do expect to read about those fundamentals, to learn those basics from a business English text in a business English classroom. The next stage was the titles stage. So the students were shown just the titles of the two texts and asked to provide the answer in the questionnaire to the question, which of the two texts would you prefer to read, just based on the titles. Okay? And as you can see, the percentage of students who chose text B, the basics of the fundamentals of the internet-based text, is more than twice as high as the percentage of students who indicated text A, the one from the course. Okay. The next stage was the skimming stage. So the students were given the texts and instructed to skim them quickly, 1 minute for each of the texts, and then again decide which of the two texts they would like to read more closely. So the results at this stage changed, as you can see. The percentage of students who indicated they would like to read text A more closely is almost identical to the percentage of students who would prefer to read text B more closely. The while reading activities involved inferring meaning from context, analyzing and summarizing paragraphs, preparing quiz questions, but this was not covered in the questionnaire. Post-reading activities included comprehension quiz, where students sort of tested each other on the understanding of the text and remembering the information extracted from the text, but this was not covered in the questionnaire. What was covered in the questionnaire was the useful facts and information stage, I will explain in a second, and the final evaluation. So the facts, the useful information or facts stage. Well, I asked the students to elicit 1, 2, or 3 pieces of information from each of the two texts and evaluate the information in terms of its usefulness. So what would you like to remember from the text? How useful and how relevant do you find the facts or the pieces of information which you found in both texts? So as you can see, the information that students perceived as relevant, useful, or very relevant, very useful prevails in text B, in the internet-based fundamentals of, basics of. And even more interestingly, the number of facts or pieces of information that students classified as not very useful or useless or irrelevant prevails in the texts from the course book. Okay. Finally, the final stage, after doing all the activities and working on the vocabulary and the content and the phraseology, the students were asked to provide their final evaluation. So which of the two texts is more relevant and useful, and why? Okay. So here again, the preference for text B is very clear. And interestingly, 12% of students decided that they find both texts equally relevant to their needs and equally useful. Although before they started working on the text, I told them that they must choose either A or B. So it means they couldn't decide. They decided that both texts were equally valuable. Now, in this slide, you can see how the students' decisions, choices, evaluations evolved. So at the title stage, they felt more encouraged by the fundamentals of basics of title, expecting a text which will be loaded with the content, with the basics. It changed at the skimming stage, but then at the final evaluation stage, students clearly appreciated the text, internet-based text much more. And as many as 12% of students couldn't decide. They indicated that they found both texts equally valuable and equally useful. It might also be interesting to see the evaluation patterns. So as you can see, 9% of students consistently chose text A, the coursebook text, while 33% of students consistently chose text B, 15% switched from B to A and then to B, then 12% chose text A at the first stages, but if at the final evaluation stage, they indicated text B as being more valuable. Okay. Now, if we look at the reasons that the students provided for their decisions, so they were asked to indicate why they found text A or text B more useful and more relevant. So those who preferred text A found it more interesting, more inspiring. They appreciated that the text provides a real example, tells a real story. They found it easier to understand. They also provided criticism of text B as providing only dry facts, being too scientific, too theoretical, and boring. The majority who chose text B found they have learned something that they didn't know before, something useful. They have acquired real knowledge, which will be useful for their career. They found text B containing a lot of important information they would like to remember. They found text B more relevant to their needs and more related to other university courses. And they found text B more clear, more concrete, more interesting. The arguments that the students who couldn't decide, who found text A and B equally valuable, equally useful and relevant, were quite similar to the above arguments. But interestingly, the majority of the students who indicated both text A and B as being relevant and useful suggested that text B should be read first and then text A as an illustration of a particular business issues. And that unfortunately does not happen in business English, in the popular business English course books very often. In conclusion, the study shows that pre-service business English learners at my university do expect to acquire some business knowledge, to learn some basics of business issues through reading business English materials in business English courses. They are also interested in real examples, in real stories, but there is a strong indication that they need to first learn the basics, particularly the first year students. And I think this might be of interest to not only to business English teachers, but also to course book designers who, from my experience, catered quite well for this kind of needs at A2 and B2, B1 levels of English proficiency. But at level B2 and C1, there is a sort of assumption that if the student is better at English, okay, if the level of the English language proficiency is higher, this means that we can sort of start from a higher level of business awareness and business knowledge. Of course, I understand that business English course providers cannot repeat the same information at each level of the course book, but some introductory section is really needed because the students, for example, at C level of English language proficiency get very discouraged, not by the level of the linguistic difficulty, but the level of the content difficulty of certain business-related texts. And I think that this should be taken into account, especially if the largest, in Poland, the largest market for business English course books is the university students, okay, not in-company staff, but university students. I think that the study also confirms that the rationale behind the combination of content-based instruction and ESP in tertiary education. And in my final slide, I would like to emphasize once again, as I said at the beginning of my presentation, that I'm far from claiming or believing that students' expectations and preferences related to the content of the texts should be the only or the most important criterion to judge the pedagogical value of business English reading materials. And far from that. Nevertheless, I think that students' expectations and preferences should not be underestimated because they translate into their motivation and engagement, and this in turn has a lot of impact on the success of us as teachers and them as learners. Okay, so that's it from me. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, I will be glad to answer. That's the bibliography.
Okay, so thank you, Jolanta, for your wonderful presentation. Now I'm going to ask: are there any questions here in the room? Well, before you ask, I will probably advance one such question. Jolanta, you've given the makers of textbooks a strong message there. I'd like to ask you personally, how do you use textbooks in your classes? That's question number one. And the second would be, can you imagine business English classes without textbooks at all?
As for the first question, as I said, at the lower levels of English language proficiency, of which we have fewer and fewer groups, these needs are satisfied, I think, in the course books. But for higher levels, before I start a unit, I always provide some background information from other sources, either from lower level course books or from the internet or from some other materials. And I feel that the students at higher level of English language proficiency really need that kind of introduction, especially that at my university, the students learn foreign languages, English for business purposes, and the second language, another foreign language at lower levels, but English is English for business purposes. They learn the languages during the first and second year. So this is the beginning stage of their business education. So that's the answer to the first question. I always provide supplementary material as the background for the things that are discussed in a particular unit. Sorry, what? Can I imagine the second question? I remember now. Can I imagine? Yes, I can imagine teaching business English not without one course book assigned, because I have courses in which I do that, which is of course more work. It doesn't mean that I don't use course book materials at all, but I just pick and choose from different materials. I create my own materials. I use the internet resources. Of course, it's more difficult. And to tell you the truth, some students do not like that. A lot of students really express the need to have the course book because then they feel this is sort of more structured, more organized. They know what to expect. So I don't know if the other teachers of business English have similar experiences, but I am sometimes really surprised how much students need to have the course book. So I don't think it's an ideal solution, but with some groups, especially the master students, where I teach, for example, English for logistics or English for finance, I don't just follow one course book.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. Yes. Lisa, maybe it's better if you come over here. So there's a question. Yeah, come over, because you wouldn't be heard.
It wouldn't be heard.
Yeah,
okay.
you need to speak.
I have just a short question about choosing materials for lower levels. do you have any strategies how to choose these texts wisely if you do not want to just use the course book, if you want to supplement it with something else? This is something I've been struggling with a little bit, how to choose a good material, good text for lower level students. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. As I said, we don't have many lower level courses in English, but first of all, as I said before, we've noticed that at lower levels, the texts are sort of, they include more of the basic information than the texts at the higher levels. And of course, I agree with you 100% that it's much more to find a text which would be in the internet, for instance, which would be suitable for lower levels. And if you try to adapt the text on your own, it takes a lot of work on the part of the teacher. So what I do and what I recommend in such situations is I just give a mini lecture, of course, adapted for level A2 or B1. I just tell them at the beginning and they take notes, and I treat it as, you know, like listening comprehension, note taking. Then I ask them to share in pairs what they have learned, what they have remembered. That's what I do. So of course, this is not a reading comprehension task, but it's my way of introducing the subject. If I see that lower level students don't understand certain concepts, I just explain them to them. And that's why I think it's really important for a business English teacher or any other teachers who teaches a foreign language for specific purposes, that the teacher himself or herself has this, if not profound knowledge, of course, then orientation and the ability to explain some basics, fundamentals of the concepts that the student will need to understand in order to comprehend the text.
Thank you. We've got 4 minutes, so are there any other questions? I would maybe ask Jolanta one more question concerning the the business English text in your classes. What is the proportion of how much time does it do these reading activities take in your classes in comparison to other activities?
Where actually I usually assign the very activity of reading the text as homework at the higher levels. Okay, so we don't do reading in the class. Okay, if we do reading in the class, it's usually the background to a case study, for example, things like that. But the proper reading comprehension tasks, students usually do them at home, and then in class we explain difficulties and we talk about the text, okay, or do some other activities based on the text. I even pre-teach vocabulary before the students read the text. What I do is I create a Google document which is available to all the students. They can work, the whole group I make it available to the whole group to work on, and I put a list of the phrases and expressions that I find useful and worth remembering and important. And this is, they like it because this is also indication of what kind of vocabulary I will then expect them to know for the test. So they appreciate it. And I ask the students themselves to provide the Polish equivalent, the English definition, and the example of use of this phrase, and they share the file. They all work on this same file. Okay, it's a Google document, and then when they read the text, I ask them to adapt their definitions and explanations, Polish equivalents, to the context of the text. Okay, because sometimes they pick up a different meaning. So they have this vocabulary bank for the text. We don't have to deal with it in the classroom. We only explain things that they couldn't find or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much. There are no questions in the chat, so I think that's it. So thank you, Jolanta, very much. It was very nice having you. A lot of good tips and wonderful presentation. Thank you.